I have a daughter. I cherish her and love her, yet she sees me as an enemy.
I wish you would just disappear. You're always meddling with me or Dad. This family is unhappy because of you. It's all your fault.
She told me that in her heart, I am less important than a mistress. My name is Emily, and I just turned 41 this year. I've been married for 18 years. My daughter started becoming distant from me in high school, and now that she's in college, she barely contacts me.
She often comes home late, dresses overly maturely, and always wears heavy makeup. My husband doesn't discipline her because he can't even manage himself. So, I call her advisor every now and then to check on her.
Today was no different. The advisor wasn't surprised to hear from me, but her tone was more disappointed than before.
Jessica has skipped classes for a week. She's at the bottom of her class, and she never listens during our talks.
Skipping classes, being absent, and not studying. I don't know how my daughter has become so unrecognizable. She used to be so adorable, always following me around and calling me Mom.
I'm sorry for the trouble, I said before hanging up. Then I called Jessica's best friend. At first, she hesitated and said she didn't know where Jessica was. But when I insisted that I would come to her house to look, she reluctantly told me.
It turns out Jessica has a boyfriend who dropped out of high school and has been living with him. I felt a throbbing pain in my temples as I listened.
Following the address given by her friend, I found the place where Jessica was hiding. It was a small, dirty apartment in a remote area, with the door left ajar, showing no sense of security. The inside was filled with smoke, and the shoe rack at the entrance held dirty sneakers and stiff, smelly socks. The floor was littered with cigarette boxes and takeout trash.
Frowning, I gently pushed the door open and saw my daughter dressed provocatively, kissing a skinny boy with dyed red hair. The bed was a mess of clothes. Jessica. I shouted angrily.
Who is that? The boy jumped, shrinking back. Who's this old lady? Jessica leaned against him, casually flipping her hair and giving me a dismissive glance.
Don't be alarmed. She's just the housekeeper.
Housekeeper? My heart ached.
Jessica, is this how you talk to your mother?
She sneered, unmoved. Jessica, is she really your mom?
No, just someone with a different last name, she shrugged, then got off the bed and lit a cigarette.
She turned her back to me, her exposed skin covered in suggestive marks, making my eyes well up with tears. Besides disappointment, I felt a deep sorrow.
Jessica, why?
Shut up, she snapped, turning around with an expression of utter disdain. Emily, who do you think you are? What right do you have to control me? You're always meddling with me or Dad. Do you think you're innocent just because Dad left you? If you weren't so paranoid every day, if you didn't argue with him all the time, would he have gone to Aunt Grace? Stop acting so pitiful, okay?
In the living room, Emily recalls her sacrifices and the coldness she has received in return.
I remember when I was expecting Jessica, Mother asked me to quit my job to take care of her. Even after Jessica grew up, my husband insisted I stay home.
She thinks about resigning from her senior accountant position, losing herself in the process.
I thought my sacrifices would earn their understanding and my daughter's affection. But all I got was Mother's increasing demands, Jessica's indifference, and my husband's betrayal.
She remembers the day Jessica came back home.
She only returned because she needed money. Mother was overjoyed, prepared a feast, but Jessica was angry and slammed the door.
Emily overhears a conversation from the living room.
Jessica, don't bother with her. She's just an outsider. Grandma will teach her a lesson. You are the real treasure of this family.
Emily sits on the sofa, feeling suppressed. That evening, her husband John returns.
Emily, I'm home.
He goes straight to Jessica's room to comfort her. Emily listens in disbelief.
Dad, why haven't you divorced Emily yet? Aunt Grace treats me better than she does.
Emily's heart sinks. She tosses and turns all night, questioning her sacrifices.
Why? Why have my efforts led to this? I've become nothing more than a servant in this house.
She recalls John's dismissive behavior.
He throws his clothes on the floor for me to wash, flicks ash on the floor for me to clean, and if he's dissatisfied with the food, I have to redo it.
She thinks about her conflicts with Jessica and how Mother always sides with her.
Mother treats me as an outsider, joining forces with Jessica to exclude and mock me. If I complain, I'm in the wrong, called pretentious and troublesome.
Emily reflects on her younger days.
I followed John, who had nothing but my love, and married far away. And what was the result? I couldn't fulfill my filial duties before my parents passed away. Now, I'm stuck in this family, deteriorating day by day.
She questions herself.
Why not divorce? Why not leave? I'm afraid. Afraid of having nowhere to go. Nearly 20 years as a housewife have left me with no one to rely on.
She contemplates her humble life.
I endured the presence of a homewrecker, swallowing my pride. I fantasize that Jessica is just going through a rebellious phase, hoping she will eventually understand and appreciate.
It takes a long and painful wait for her to grow up, and I don't even know if it's worth it. My mind was full of thoughts until dawn. I wanted to catch a nap in the early morning, but Mother wouldn't allow it. She forcefully pushed open my door.
Get up and make breakfast. How long do you plan to sleep? Do you expect an old woman like me to cook for the whole family? What if I fall in the kitchen? Can you take responsibility?
As she spoke, she deliberately turned on the bedroom light. The glaring light made me click my tongue in annoyance. I pulled the blanket over my head, but the noise outside didn't stop.
You eat my son's food, drink my son's drinks all day, and do nothing. My son was so upset with you that he didn't come home last night. I don't know how you can call yourself a wife. Our family must have done something wrong to have you as a daughter-in-law.
After Mother finished, Jessica chimed in.
If I were a man, I wouldn't want to marry a woman like you either. Not only are you aging, but you also don't take care of your figure. You don't even have a job, you just sit at home and enjoy the fruits of others' labor.
Her words were like countless sharp swords, piercing deep into my heart once again. I was always defenseless against her.
Don't worry, our Jessica will never end up like her. Jessica is destined for good fortune, unlike her. Even if you give her blessings, she can't hold on to them. She's utterly useless.
Who wants to end up like her? I will never follow her path.
The two of them continued to mock me outside, as if I were a stranger they despised. Under Mother's repeated nagging, I reluctantly got out of bed, washed up, and went to the kitchen to make breakfast. I had thought about arguing back, but then I considered that if we really started fighting, it would be exhausting. Jessica might side with her grandmother and argue with me, and then leave home in anger. After all, this had happened several times before. During breakfast, Jessica was putting on makeup and talking sweetly on the phone with her new boyfriend. Mother didn't scold her but lovingly fed her. I looked at Jessica, deeply afraid that she might do something she would regret. So after breakfast, I went to her room to find her. She was in front of the mirror, adjusting her ultra-short skirt and low-cut top.
Jessica.
She glanced at me and then frowned.
What do you want?
Did you change boyfriends again?
What does it have to do with you?
She snorted and looked me up and down.
Don't tell people you're my mom.
Her words were as harsh as ever.
Jessica, do you know this boy well? Do you think he's reliable? Is it right for you to skip classes and hang out with him every day?
Enough.
She got angry and threw her bag at me.
Jessica. Why are you so irresponsible?
Jessica wasn't afraid at all and glared at me.
Have you said enough? Can you stop meddling in my life?
My daughter stood before me, shouting at me in a fit of rage. Mother rushed over upon hearing the commotion, asking what was going on. I looked at Jessica in disappointment, watching her walk towards me step by step in high heels that didn't match her age.
Emily, do you know that every time I go out, it's Aunt Grace who gives me money? Even this bag in front of you was bought by Aunt Grace. Because you never buy me anything. Compared to you, she's more like my mother.
At that moment, something inside me was gradually breaking, something like dignity. Jessica slammed the door and stormed out, leaving Mother clapping her thigh and scolding me.
You can't even take care of your own daughter, and yet you insist on meddling. Someone else is helping you care for her, and you don't even appreciate it. You always make the whole family unhappy. I don't know how Jessica ended up with a mother like you. She's really unlucky.
I hung my head, my expression gloomy, and said nothing. Mother, finding no satisfaction in her scolding, tidied up and went out to play mahjong. I picked up the bag from the floor and stared at it for a long time. Heather is John's colleague, and they've been involved for years. I knew about it all along. Both Heather and John have their own incomes. Unlike me, who quit my job to become a full-time housewife with no income at all, relying entirely on the monthly allowance John gives me. This allowance also has to cover household expenses. And Jessica, at some point, developed a taste for luxury goods. Last time, I gave her a floral dress for her birthday, which I had saved up for a long time to buy. She thought it was embarrassing and never wore it.
Mom, why did you even buy this? It's so old-fashioned.
Later, I wanted to take her out for a meal to make it up to her, but she refused, bluntly saying she wanted the new Burberry collection.
I don't want to go out for a meal. Just get me the new Burberry collection.
I fell silent because I couldn't afford it. Seeing my reluctance, she stormed off to find John. John is stingy with me but generous with her. Without a second thought, he bought her the new Burberry collection. Jessica looked stunning in it. I didn't think much of it until one day, while cleaning the house, I accidentally saw the dress I bought for Jessica being used as a cushion in the cat's bed. I pretended not to see it and kept it to myself. Jessica has no idea what my life is like. At the end of the month, if I run out of money, I even have to buy cheaper sanitary products. John won't give me extra allowance, and Jessica doesn't like me touching her things. For years, I wouldn't go to the hospital for minor illnesses, and only when I couldn't bear it anymore would I call John for help. No one can help me. I am acutely aware of my own insignificance and absurdity, and I know I am powerless and have brought this upon myself. After that day, Jessica didn't come home for several days. I couldn't find her, and when I called her friends, I discovered they had blocked my number. I went to her school but couldn't get any useful information. So I had no choice but to ask John. After calling 7 or 8 times, John finally answered, sounding impatient.
What's going on?
I ignored his tone, only concerned about my daughter.
Where's Jessica? She hasn't been to school. Do you know where she is? She shouldn't be eating takeout all the time. It's not good for her health.
John was silent for a moment, then said,
Stop worrying about her.
With that, he hung up. I stared at the dark screen of my phone, falling into silence. John's tone clearly indicated he wasn't worried, which meant he knew where Jessica was. To reconcile with Jessica, I went to John's office. Although I wasn't sure if Jessica was there, even if she wasn't, I could ask John. After all, she is my daughter too. To my surprise, as soon as I reached the entrance, I saw a scene that made me freeze. Through the glass of the building, I saw 3 people holding hands, smiling and looking harmonious. On John's left was Jessica, and on Jessica wore her beautiful new dress and carried a new bag on her arm, smiling at Heather with a radiance I had never seen before. When they came out, I didn't avoid them and faced the three of them head-on. Jessica's smile froze instantly, and Heather was also taken aback.
What are you doing here?
I just.
I silently looked at Heather. Her delicate face showed no signs of her age, well maintained to the point of envy. Noticing my gaze, Heather quickly lowered her head, as if I had wronged her.
Emily, what kind of look is that? Are you here to cause trouble for Aunt Heather on purpose?
I looked at Jessica in disbelief, my throat dry and sore, unable to utter a word.
Enough. You should go back. Jessica is safe with me.
Dad, why aren't you saying anything to her? Look at her, she's clearly glaring at Aunt Heather on purpose. Aunt Heather hasn't done anything.
How unfamiliar it all felt. That was my daughter, my biological daughter, the daughter I had brought into this world after a near-death experience, yet she was fiercely defending Heather, defending her to the point of making me feel jealous, envious, and disgusted. I suddenly realized, why did I feel disgusted with my own daughter? Why? Before I could think further, the three of them had already left, with Jessica even rolling her eyes at me. They walked away hand in hand, like a family. I was in a daze for days after returning home, until the anniversary of my parents' passing forced me out. It rained that day. John and Jessica were still not home, and Mom was playing mahjong. I used the little money I had left to visit my parents' graves. The cemetery wasn't in a prime location. As I looked at my parents' tombstones under the thunder and lightning, I felt no fear, only deep regret and unprecedented guilt.
Dad. Mom.
It wasn't until I was exhausted from crying that my sorrow temporarily subsided. For some reason, I didn't want to go home. I bought a cup of milk at a shop, sat there, and fell asleep on the table. In my dream, my parents came back. They were as loving as I remembered, preparing a table full of delicious food, steaming hot. They surrounded me, asking about my well-being. Dad served me food, and Mom caressed my face, saying how much I had suffered over the years. The warmth of the dream was so comforting that I didn't want to wake up. It was the shop owner who gently woke me. Seeing the sunset and evening glow outside, I knew it was time to leave. On the way back, my heart felt heavy. Suddenly, a strange phone call interrupted my thoughts. I found it odd since I didn't recognize the number and had no friends.
Hello?
Hello, is this Ms. Emily?
Yes, it is.
The call brought me shocking news. My parents had left me 3 properties before they passed away, 2 storefronts in the city center, and a sum of money. That was their lifetime savings, all left to their only daughter. I stood there in shock for a long time, feeling lost and bewildered.
Wait, do I have money now?
Emily felt a surge of joy and hurried home to share the good news. Just as she was about to open the door, she heard laughter from inside.
Oh, Heather, I've been waiting for you.
Don't let Emily come back today, or it'll ruin the fun.
Today is her parents' Memorial Day. She won't come back to disturb us.
And where will Emily sleep?
Who cares about her? I'll just sleep with Aunt Grace tonight.
The house was filled with harmony. Emily stood at the door, motionless, her hand on the doorknob. Their laughter told her she didn't belong in their family anymore.
My biggest wish is to call Aunt Grace Mom.
Emily's mind went blank. A ringing filled her ears. Aunt Grace becoming Mom? Jessica's smile towards Heather was now etched in her mind, like her subconscious was battling with her. They were trying to tell her that her daughter no longer saw her as her mother.
If Aunt Grace becomes my mom, our family will be so happy.
Amid their laughter, Emily pushed open the door. Her appearance like a piece of ice dropped into boiling water, instantly cooling the room.
Why are you back?
What are you doing here?
John looked at Emily with a complicated expression.
Oh, it's still raining outside. Emily, aren't you cold? Should I get you a cup of hot water?
Heather remained seated on the sofa. Emily looked at each of them in turn. John, avoiding her gaze. Jessica, full of disdain. Linda, with a look of disgust. And finally Heather, with her false concern. Without a word, she threw down her umbrella and walked into the room without changing her shoes.
Do you think this is a park? Don't you know your shoes are dirty?
Grandma, you don't clean the house anyway. Don't be mad, just make her clean every corner later.
Linda, realizing the logic, sat back down. Emily left the door open and rummaged through the closet for what she needed. The noise drew John to the room.
Emily, what are you looking for?
Emily didn't respond.
Emily, haven't you already accepted this?
Emily stopped and slowly looked at him. His eyes became evasive under her gaze. The room was silent for a long time, long enough for her to recall their years together, from their first meeting to falling in love, getting married, his betrayal, and becoming strangers.
John, let's get a divorce.
The argument was on the verge of erupting.
Impressive. You think you can get a share of the property through separation? Do you believe we'll just let you have your way?
John stared at me in disbelief, but I calmly met his gaze.
You parasite, staying at home all day like a useless worm. What do you have besides relying on my son? If you have the guts, just leave. Tomorrow my son will end this marriage, and you won't get a penny from us. I want to see where you'll go, with your parents long gone. Sleep on the streets? Beg in public?
Jessica wasn't to be outdone, leaning against the door and joining the family in their mockery.
You're really naive if you think a separation can threaten Dad now. Actually, Dad has wanted to leave you for a long time. If it weren't for the help you gave him back then, he would have left you already.
Her words reminded me. Back then John had nothing, and it was me who helped him willingly.
You call that help? My son has supported her for so many years, she couldn't repay it even if she worked like a servant for several lifetimes.
Sharp and bitter words characterized this family's treatment of me. I put my ID and important documents into the bag I had used for over 10 years, suppressing my emotions, and spoke to them in a detached tone.
When John had nothing, it was my father who helped him start his business. When John bought the house, it was my mother's money that renovated it. On the day Jessica was born, John was with Heather, and I knew it well. On the day my parents passed away, John was also at Heather's place, while I was forced to take care of a crying Jessica.
Linda immediately retorted.
Emily, your words are too harsh. How can you make yourself sound so innocent? Wasn't my son working hard for this family?
Harsh. When you found out Jessica was a girl, the things you said were far harsher than anything I'm saying now.
You're lying.
To you, I'm always lying because I'm an outsider.
As I spoke, I continued packing my belongings. Unable to refute, they fell silent. I didn't look up to see their expressions but continued to expose the years of their oppression and my endurance.
Over the years, I've done everything a housekeeper should do in this home, without any of the rights a hostess should have. From Jessica's birth to her middle school years, I took care of her, while you credited everything to John, who was rarely home and only gave a few $1,000s a month for living expenses. You drained me to the bone and still called me worthless.
Having said all this, I prepared to leave with my bag. As expected, I saw John's sullen face, Linda's flushed with anger, and Jessica's complex expression.
Go. Let her go. She's just a nobody, with no money, no home, and no job. I want to see where she goes.
Have some dignity. Don't come back after leaving, or I'll look down on you even more.
John remained silent throughout. Heather sat in the living room, watching us, or rather watching me, with a look of triumphant satisfaction. But I didn't care. I had already given up on everyone in John's family. Emily walked away without looking back, dragging her suitcase and carrying her bag, treading the dark night road. The cold wind made her recall an incident from the past. One night, shortly after Jessica was born, Emily discovered Heather's presence on John's phone. This led to a fierce argument between John and her, with Linda fanning the flames and pushing her out.
John, why is Heather on your phone? What is going on?
It's nothing, Emily. You're overreacting.
In the end, John, in a fit of rage, struck her. At that moment, Emily was so furious that she decided to leave home. But as soon as she reached the door, she realized she had no money, not even enough for a cab. She wanted to complain to her parents, only to remember they were no longer alive. Then Jessica's cries came from inside the house.
I can't leave Jessica. What am I supposed to do?
At that moment, she felt bound by an invisible force, her feet as heavy as lead. She couldn't leave. She could only turn back and push the door open again.
Look who's come crawling back.
Couldn't go far without any money, could you?
Seeing her return, John and Linda mocked her for a long time, belittling her to the point of worthlessness.
I admit defeat. I'm sorry.
She returned to the room in tears to hold the constantly crying Jessica.
Those days were truly miserable. My parents had always taught me to be dignified and strong. When did I stray so far from their teachings? I should live for myself, not for a bloodline or a promise.
Since the Leaf family treated her this way, she had no reason to stay.
As for Jessica, she will no longer be my daughter and will have nothing to do with me.
Emily spent a night at a hotel, choosing the cheapest single bedroom. The next day, John called her, and they met at the Civil Affairs Bureau.
John, now you can finally be with Heather openly. Congratulations, you don't have to worry about others' opinions anymore.
John could tell her words were unpleasant. He pursed his lips and left with a sullen face, not even saying goodbye.
How rude.
She watched his car drive away and smiled coldly. After ending the dreadful marriage, she completed the paperwork and found the house her parents had left her. The house was in the heart of the city, newly renovated in a style she loved.
This place is perfect. It feels like home.
She put down her luggage and looked around the house, feeling incredibly happy. It took a while to calm down before she went to the bank. Emily withdrew a substantial sum of money left by her parents. It was quite a significant amount.
I can finally use my own money to buy clothes, change my phone, get new bags, and invest in myself. Beauty salons, gyms, hospitals.
After spending several months, she revamped herself from head to toe. Looking at the radiant person in the mirror, she couldn't believe that one day she wouldn't have to look like a downtrodden servant.
Visiting the cemetery again, I gently touched the tombstone and whispered, Mom, Dad, your daughter seems to be coming back to herself. I know you will always watch over me.
The black and white photos of her parents still had warm smiles. 3 months after the divorce, John and Heather got married. Emily felt no emotion, as she would never have any connection with the Lee family again. Just when she thought their lives would no longer intersect, an unexpected event occurred. Jessica called her. Emily was picking up her car that day, sitting inside when she curiously answered the call.
Emily. So that's why you had the guts to get a divorce, because your parents left you an inheritance?
What do you want, Jessica?
Aren't you going to do something for me? I am your daughter.
Do what?
Emily. Grandma was right, you're a heartless woman. As soon as you knew you had money, you divorced, afraid that Dad and I would spend a penny of yours. You're stingy beyond belief.
Emily smiled, not wanting to argue, and calmly responded with a simple That made Jessica even more agitated, causing her to speak recklessly.
Your money is mine. Are you hiding it to take it to the grave? I'm your only heir. If you don't give it to me, what are you keeping it for? I'm telling you, you must buy me a house, a car, and leave me savings, or I'll take legal action. I'll make sure you end up in jail.
With that, Jessica hung up the phone. Emily shook her head and sighed. Not reading could truly be detrimental.
Anyway, Jessica and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. Whatever she wants to do is her business.
Relying on her previous skills, Emily applied for an accounting position and re-entered the workforce. She was a bit rusty at first, but she spent a few nights familiarizing herself with the updated software and methods, starting anew in this area. To her surprise, after only a few days, Jessica and Linda found her new address.
To avoid disturbing the neighbors, I let them in.
I was wondering why you left so nonchalantly this time. Turns out you had some good stuff hidden away.
Everything here will be mine eventually. Grandma, which room do you like?
Emily poured herself a glass of water and took a sip.
This house has nothing to do with you.
Just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. The law has the final say.
It's one thing for Jessica to be ignorant, but Linda too?
My granddaughter is right. The master bedroom will be hers, and the second bedroom will be mine. We'll see if Aunt Grace likes the decor, especially since she's expecting. She needs to live comfortably for the sake of my grandchild.
Heather is expecting. But that has nothing to do with me. I won't give my things to anyone. Calm, aloud, are you leaving?
Emily took out her phone and smiled at them.
Leaving? Emily, it's you who should be leaving.
You can't remarry now, but the stuff should still go to Jessica. Maybe we'll give you a few $1,000s.
A few $1,000s? Makes a call.
Emily, who are you calling?
The police.
As soon as Emily finished speaking, Jessica and Linda were stunned. The police gave them a stern lecture and a warning.
But she's my mom, she has to support me.
You are over 18. Miss Emily has fulfilled her obligation to you.
Leaning against the door, Emily watched Jessica's defeated expression and Linda's astonished look, feeling a sense of vindication. They left her home, gritting their teeth in frustration. That evening, John called her. Guessing he was concerned about what happened earlier, she blocked his number without a second thought and deleted all contact information for the Lee family. With peace and quiet, her life returned to normal. However, the Lee family was more persistent than she had imagined, trying every possible way to invite her to dinner for over a week. To put an end to it, she finally agreed to go. In the private room, the whole family was there.
I'm really glad you could come.
Emily gave her a faint smile, internally celebrating her entry into the Lee family's trap.
Why did you call me here?
She asked, resting her chin on her hand and smiling at them, the ring on her finger reflecting a dazzling light.
Mom is going to give me a little brother. Our family invited you to share the joy.
Is that all?
She asked indifferently, narrowing her eyes. Seeing her lack of reaction, a trace of disappointment and resentment flashed in Jessica's eyes. They exchanged glances, and John was the first to break the silence.
Emily, we were once married. Jessica is not only my daughter but also your biological child. You can't completely abandon her.
Oh. Isn't having you enough? I remember you have quite a bit of savings over the years.
John hesitated, pursing his lips and avoiding her gaze. Linda seized the opportunity to cover for him.
Emily, Jessica is your daughter.
I don't acknowledge her.
Jessica slammed the table in anger, a hint of grievance on her face.
You.
Aunt Grace hurried to console her, her attempts at comfort seeming almost theatrical.
There, Jessica. It's not worth getting upset over.
John sighed deeply, turning to Emily with a resigned expression.
Emily, you care about Jessica the most.
I gazed at John's face and lowered my eyes.
So even you know that I care about her the most.
For a moment, he was at a loss for words. Linda quickly seized the opportunity.
Yes, everyone knows how much you love Jessica. She's counting on you.
I raised my head and looked at them, curiosity piqued.
So, what do you all want?
They thought I had given them hope, each one smiling at me.
Oh, not much. Just a house and a car will do.
I want a house in the city center. And the car should be something my boyfriend likes.
I couldn't even remember which boyfriend this was for her.
Yes, Jessica is right.
Linda agreed cheerfully, but her eyes were on Heather's belly, thinking about her eagerly awaited grandson. I found it quite amusing and propped my chin up, observing them.
So, John, why don't you provide these things for Jessica? It seems you all have it figured out. You want to save John's money for Heather's son, don't you?
Emily, don't say such things.
Jessica's smile froze, and she turned to look at John and Heather.
Don't listen to her nonsense. Your brother is still young. How could he compete with you for anything?
Jessica pushed her away and looked directly at John.
Is that true?
After a long silence, John lowered his head.
He is my son. You have Emily to provide for you. It's fair.
I knew Jessica's competitive nature well and could see her disappointment at that moment. Listening to their conversation, I couldn't help but laugh.
You John family members are really good at imagining things. When did I ever say I would buy her anything?
Their expressions changed instantly.
Emily. Is it fun to play with people?
Calmly, I smoothed my hair.
I've already divorced you. None of the John family members have anything to do with me. As for Jessica, she's just someone who happened to be born through me.
My words hurt Jessica even more, who was already feeling low. But this time, I didn't care about her. I picked up my bag and left without looking back. No one stopped me. From then on, I had no more ties with the John family, and they never sought me out again. In the blink of an eye, 2 years passed. I was fortunate to remarry a mature and steady man named Richard. He was well-educated and came from a healthy family. He took care of me meticulously, making me feel cherished and loved. That year, Richard and I went to the hospital to visit his parents, and unexpectedly, I saw someone who surprised me.
Jessica?
I was puzzled and looked up to see her coming out of a crowded ward alone. Her face was pale, and she looked at me in surprise.
Mom.
Before she could finish calling me Mom, her eyes fell on the wedding ring on my hand. Complex emotions erupted on her face, and I saw unmistakable tears in her eyes. Finally, Jessica gave a bitter smile, lowered her head, and moved away, avoiding my gaze as she brushed past me. Although I had no contact with the John family over the years, I had heard some news. Heather and John had moved to another province to accompany their son for his studies, and Linda, satisfied with her grandson, had stopped caring about Jessica. Thus, she was completely abandoned as a pawn. I turned to watch Jessica's solitary figure leaning against the wall as she walked away, but I said nothing, because we were no longer mother and daughter.